and welcome. My name is Lesley Butcher and I'm a lecturer in adult nursing at Cardiff University. Emotional intelligence is having the ability to understand, to process and communicate the emotions of others and ourselves. It's a skill that requires self-awareness, self-regulation and the fluidity to interpret, adapt and manage social situations with empathy. Those of us who work in social care and health organisations need to be able to work in an emotionally intelligent way to improve communication, develop good working relationships, avoid unnecessary conflict, and to enable us to reduce our stress and improve our well-being. So I have with me today Professor David Sheard. David's a Professor of Emotional Intelligence at York St John University. He's a social worker by background, specialising in dementia care and mental health, and he's held many senior positions in old age psychiatry in the NHS. David later co-founded Dementia Care Matters and set that up and was CEO for 23 years, I believe, until he ended that role in 2017. I've been a huge fan of David's for many years, for probably over 10 years, I would say, when I was going back to when I was managing care homes for people living with dementia. And I would say that David's teaching has had a tremendous influence on my own practice. He's considered a world leader in cultural change, and I think probably what strikes me the most about David is that his teaching comes from a place of authenticity. And I think that hopefully we'll be talking about that today. So David, can I just say what an honour it is to have you here today?
Thank you, real pleasure. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I believe you're the first person with the title of Professor of Emotional Intelligence. Is that right?
That's correct. As far as we know, I've not ever heard of another. No.
Brilliant. So the only one in the UK, at least, that as far as we know. I'm not sure the rest of the world, but can you tell us a little bit about your role? What does a Professor of Emotional Intelligence do?
Yeah, so I'm obviously only 3 months into the role. And so it's been an exploratory journey, both to look at internally the role in the university at York St John, and then externally what I'm going to be offering outwards. So internally, I'm based in what's called the School of Science, Technology and Health. And basically what I've been doing the last 3 months is looking at work across schools and across programs. So looking at nursing, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech and language, social work, social justice, counselling, and also we have something at York St John called Converge, which is education for recovery. So I've been meeting with all the other various professors and heads of programs to look at how much emotional intelligence curriculum is within those programs, and then how we can start to foster an increased role of that. Externally, it's been fascinating because for 2 years I was out, although I've worked 40 years in health and social care, for 2 years someone actually used the word last week, disappeared, and said, we've been looking for you, David, and you became invisible. No email, no organisation, not in Brighton where you used to be, and we presumed you had just disappeared. We gave up looking. That's because I had a severe clinical depression, and that's also influencing a lot of this role now as well. But externally, what's been fascinating is that I felt even more than other people that I disappeared. I remember being really poorly and saying one day to my partner, Peter, I've become nothing, I'm a no one. And that's how I lived for a long time, paralysed with anxiety and fear and dread and a feeling that I'd lost self. But what's been fascinating is the emergence of me in this role at the university as a professor. As I was saying yesterday, we had a strategic review, and I was saying it's resulted in a positive, not a negative, but a positive tsunami, a tidal wave, with people contacting from States, Canada, Holland, across the UK. And so I've been sitting and really having to think about well, if there's these 54 requests already in without really publicising what I'm going to offer, what am I going to be externally? And I think I'd summarise it in a few ways. I intend at York St John to do a major research study on emotional intelligence in care, and we'll be looking for partner organisations to participate in that, because the evidence base is still poor, even though in our gut we all know and feel that emotional intelligence is got to be at the heart of person-centred care. The evidence base is still not that developed. So the prime role will be for me to develop that evidence base. Secondly, to create a national profile on the subject matter and to create an alliance with others, which is why I'm obviously delighted to be doing this with you and trying to, in the next month, I'm doing 5 different podcasts in different aspects of emotional intelligence to get it out there as a profile.
Yeah.
There's discussion about a foundation for emotional intelligence in care with the university. And I've just completed, literally this morning, the article that will be my inaugural lecture that goes into the Journal of Dementia Care. So to get more, obviously, writing out there as well. So at this point, that I would just summarise as where in the first 3 months we've seen it developing.
Oh, you're a very busy person then. I just wanted to come back to what you said about having the depression and everything. I didn't want to kind of let that go. I'm really sorry that you went through that. And I have to say, it's amazing that you feel that you can share that. And I think that that's inspiring that you can share that. And I think that this is part of the message, isn't it? About being authentic, a bit about being able to be vulnerable, and that is a normal thing to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
We don't need to hide this. Yeah.
And it's really it's been incredibly fascinating, because someone who knew that I'd had this depression in our professional world said recently, so how on earth have you been made a professor?
Oh God.
And it was like a complete, a bit like your facial reaction. It was like, goodness, so that actually in our world of care, and they know the person I am and have been all my life, in both personally and professionally, and yet they're questioning whether that then warrants my eligibility to hold a professorial title. And thank goodness the Vice Chancellor didn't feel it. In fact, she felt quite the opposite. But it's that sort of feeling of, so we still judge people by an experience of mental health as if that is an incapability for the ongoing life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than if they've managed to, survive and work through and get through the other end, and it will always be a part of me. I'll never forget, the nights laying in bed at 3 a.m. with anxiety attacks and paralysis of feelings, and waking up in the morning and then realizing I couldn't face the day, and it being even an effort to step outside the door. That will never go away. But of course, I hope we'll eventually live in a world where people will see that as an added value to an individual, and particularly in what we're all about. Yeah. That surely in health and social care, we're about vulnerability. And I always used to have this phrase, we're only a flicker away. We're only a flicker away from being vulnerable, in need, desperate, and if you forget that, then I think that's when you shouldn't be in health and social care, because we are literally, there's no them and us. We're all open to life's possibilities, negative, positive, whatever it could be like.
Absolutely. And do you feel as if that experience for you has made you more empathetic towards other people who have a depression or have other mental health problems?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because it's led me to really worry about others, because what I've said recently is, I had a partner that I'd been with 32 years who loves me to bits. I had a home, so I wasn't financially strapped. I didn't have to worry about money if I wasn't working for 2 years. I have a family who love me. I have a daughter, I have grandsons who mean the world to me. But even with all that around me, this is quite difficult to say. Even now, as you can tell, as I hesitate, even with all that around me, I remember saying, I'm done as a person.
Yeah.
And so I think about all my advantages in life and still the dark place where I went to, and I hope I'll never, ever forget it. And so my message is more one of, if I was, with all that around me, still went to that place, how do other people without all those advantages, how do they crawl their way out? And I feel until we get a world that grasps what it takes, I think every day about people and think, how do they believe, with everything I had around me, how does anybody believe that life will still be worth it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just goes to show us, I mean, we know this, but it just goes to show us that depression has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with, whether or not we feel loved. It is something that it's really difficult to define, I think. And I'm still actually a bit gobsmacked by what you described that person was saying. But interestingly, as I was getting ready to speak to you today, I had in the back of my mind, I hope David doesn't make me cry today.
Right.
You know that you make people cry sometimes. You've been known for that.
It's funny you said that, because I actually got sent a book that's come out recently by a journalist in Toronto. Her name's Moira Welsh. And the book is called Happily Ever Older. And I didn't know about the book. And it came because someone had discovered it and said, you better read this. And the first line of the book is, David Sheard makes people cry. And then she goes on to describe my work and why I do. And I used to worry about that over the years, because that is something that I think some people judge me on. A bit like, oh, is he a bit of a kooky guy? And what is all this emotion in him? And why does he seek or want to create those connections with other people in that highly emotional way? And of course, it wasn't a deliberate construct, but it did become a huge aspect of my work over the years. And it was about the belief that in the end, every one of us is a feeling-based person.
Yeah.
And what happens when we stop thinking we are, or stop feeling we are? What has happened to us at home, with a partner, at work, in school? Something must have happened, because it is natural to actually live your emotional world. And so if you shut it down or block it, why? And what is that going to cost you in the future?
Sometimes as healthcare professionals, we're taught that we have to be professional and that we have to withhold our emotions and suppress our emotions. And I think that was part of what I was thinking about. Today I was reflecting, well, why do I not want to cry? Why am I afraid? And I come to the conclusion, look, if I do, I do, because this is normal, and we should be showing that it is normal for us to express our emotions. We're not robots. We're feeling-based people and we have to be, to care for other people. If we suppress those emotions in ourselves and in our colleagues, how can we understand a person who needs our help emotionally, in emotional care, which caring for people is emotional care?
Absolutely. I used to sort of think that in terms of, how do families view a health and social care sector if it is emotionless? If we don't show that, when they're flooded with emotion as families because of what they're experiencing with a family member. So I think that there's a difference, an important difference. If I was sat in front of an adult living with autism now, or somebody living with mental health experience, or someone highly vulnerable, and someone living with dementia, I wouldn't have the same conversation I've just had with you.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be describing my depths of despair and the gravity of it. It wouldn't be, I always would hold that back. But what I wouldn't hold back is when the person I'm trying to reach is getting a sense from me that I have been to places in my life, that I have those feelings, that I am not sat there as Professor David Sheard. I'm sat there as David Sheard, who's had tough, vulnerable moments in life that I would not describe and put out. But what I would try and show is that I know that flicker is very, very small between the person and myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've just demonstrated the definition of emotional intelligence in action, haven't you, with that discernment of, I'm feeling this and I'm aware of my own feelings, but I wouldn't express it to this person because I'm aware of their feelings. I would express it to this, but it's about having that that fluidity. Is that right? Of being able to move through these different...
Yes, that's an interesting word, because I think it's even a better word than I would use, because I would have talked about emotional navigation as being a vital part of emotional intelligence, that you have developed both a simplicity but also a sophistication. And I think that's the difficulty about emotional intelligence. It has both, but you have to be able to weld both together in order to then emotionally navigate yourself with your family, partner, friends, colleagues, in a work scenario that's tricky. It's making that emotional navigation judgment call of, where do I pitch here? I'm not going to pitch ever as non-emotional, as non-connected. But the degree of the emotional navigation is something that I would need to anticipate and, in both a simple and a sophisticated, work out with this person or this team as to where I take the emotional processing that's going on in the room. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I guess the opposite to that would be concrete thinking, wouldn't it? And I know I've had conversations with people about emotional intelligence and how important it is to be emotionally intelligent when we're caring for our patients in our residents of care homes, and dealing with our colleagues as well, just our everyday life. And some people have actually said to me, well, to be honest, I'd rather just have someone who knows their stuff, as if it's a choice, as if you're either going to be clever and skilled and know your stuff as a nurse, or you're going to be a nice person. Well, you can be both. But there seems to be this idea, and it's not even an unspoken idea, people say it, that you can't be both things at the same time. Either you're that way or you're really good at your job.
And yet, actually, we all know people who are very clever and skilled that we wouldn't go to, that actually they wouldn't be the person you'd reach out to. And so I would say that real intelligence and real skill has an absolute requirement of also emotional intelligence within it. Otherwise, that concrete thinking, that detachment will limit what is on offer.
Yeah. And I think people sometimes hide behind that, don't they? Because, people feel uncomfortable with emotions sometimes, and perhaps they're not, people don't have that level of emotional intelligence, I guess, sometimes, that they think, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable when somebody expresses emotion to me because it puts me in touch with my own painful emotions. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want to feel that. So therefore, I'm going to put up this barrier. Professional barrier, if you like.
I think there is a real fear that if you open this area up in your life, personally or professionally, and in your work role and in an organisation, that you'll unleash an emotional tidal wave that will detract from what you're trying to achieve as outcomes in health or social care. When, of course, without it, the outcomes you will achieve will be very limited. in their depth. They'll have, in the article I've just written and sent off this morning, I talked about emotional intelligence is the opposite of shallow.
Yeah.
And I would say that health or social care that is delivered by people who want to be concrete, who are fearful of the emotional agenda in the room, and who want to close it down because they think it could unleash unmanageable waves, are actually delivering, in the end, misguidedly or unconsciously, very shallow connections and care. And that if you want to develop real depth and outcomes of real depth for people, which is what we all want. We all want, in the end, mental health or physical health to have some depth to it. And the analogy I've used for years is, when I had my major heart attack 17 years ago, and I was in cardiac A&E, and then went into the second one before my partner or daughters could come. To this day, I remember the nurse who'd been there from the beginning, who, as I went into the second one, held my hand and said to the crash team, "We are not going to let this lovely man go." And I could have gone and it would have been okay. Yeah. Because at that moment, regardless of the technology around me and regardless of all the people and regardless of the fact my family weren't there, and I was thinking, well, everyone in my family's died before me and I'm 46, so there was a feeling of, this person in these few hours has got me. This person has understood the sort of person I've tried to be or want to be. And she's physically holding in my hand and she's saying to them in their technical arena as they all come round, actually, this man matters to me as a human being.
Yeah.
And then I'll be the nurse. And that was my experience, fascinating in cardiac care, that all the stuff I'd been talking for years about person-centered care, never mind emotional intelligence, which has become a more recent strand of my work. But actually, I was fascinated that it was utterly natural to people in cardiac care, that their whole basis of keeping you well with very damaged hearts was to reach you and reach out to you. And reach out to your partner and your daughter. And it was like, so cardiac care has actually really got the embracing of whole person care.
So that nurse was actually treating you like you were a person. She was being a person, but and I noticed you said, and then she was the nurse, so she could do her clinical skills properly. She could fulfill all that role, but she could also move seamlessly from being a person and creating that personal connection with you to then doing the stuff that she needed to do.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
terms of your cardiac function.
But I know that some people professionally find that scary. They are perhaps, and I don't judge them, because perhaps they have had lives without support, without the opportunity and space for development, without perhaps people reaching them. And there are many reasons why it can feel scary to talk about emotional intelligence in care. If you're a nurse or a social worker or a care worker or a manager, leader, where you've not had it in your own life and therefore you don't know how to be it.
Yeah. Can you learn to be it, do you think?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously I've been doing a major literature review since being in post. And, it's staggering. There are actually, over the last 15 years, there's been 30,000 references on emotional intelligence, not just in care, but in business, in other sectors. So when people say, oh, well, there's not much evidence base for emotional intelligence, actually, 30,000 references out there suggest that the whole world is hugely invested in emotional intelligence in all the sectors. The debate still goes on and different belief systems about whether you can learn it or whether it's innate. I would argue both. I would say, don't you, when you walk in a shop and you meet a shop assistant, the one that you'd employ that day, as you're handing your item over or to pay for it, or when they just utterly engage with you in a way that's way beyond the item you're buying and way beyond the price of it or whatever. And you just think, my goodness, they'd be utterly natural in health or social care work. They would have so much to give and offer and reach and connect people. And you also meet people in those same roles and you think, well, that was a cursory connection and they didn't really. But are we saying that it's only innate people suitable with emotional intelligence to be in health and social care? I don't think so. I think perhaps learn isn't the right way. I think you can be given opportunities in work settings to develop. And that happens to all of us in life in many aspects of learning. I mean, take me, people thought it hysterical the day that Peter, my partner, bought me an iPhone because I had run organizations for years, and I'm talking up until only probably 12 years ago, where I've never turned a computer on, ever, never used a keyboard. I was group principal social worker at University Hospital, managing 66 social workers, but, and so I became known personally, professionally as the guy who doesn't go near anything. And so the year that Peter bought me the iPhone for Christmas, my family fell about laughing. But what happened? Within one day of having my iPhone, it somehow felt, in ways other pieces of IT hadn't, that innately I got it. I got an iPhone and I got the sense of how to work it and connect to it. And I became hooked on it and wanting an iPad. And so it grew and grew. And I think that analogy can apply to emotional intelligence, that people who've not had the upbringing or the education or work opportunities, when offered it, can fly with this and become naturals themselves through having the right mentor, the right manager leader, the right course that enables them to actually broaden what they see life's about. So I think it's possible, certainly, to develop yourself in it.
I mean, I think for me personally, I feel as if I have developed my emotional intelligence over the years. And I look back on some of the things that I said to patients and I cringe. I think, I can't believe that I said that to that person, thinking that that was the right thing to say. I feel as if I've now learned, and I think I'm now learning to, as you say, navigate, think before you speak, that kind of thing. Be able to understand what somebody else might be going through. I think I feel as if I've learned, and my inkling is that it's possible for people to learn, but I guess we need to establish. I think it's hard to prove, isn't it? It's hard to be able to find the evidence for that.
It is, and part of my new role at the university, I intend to start offering both internally and externally workshops on actually looking at this whole issue of emotional processing and emotional navigation. And can it be developed in people? I believe that if you tap into people's life history and actually find the key moments in someone's life and get them to reflect on the power those moments have been in creating your own identity now, I think there are roots. Everyone has had those moments. And if people are willing to re-explore them, I think you can find new routes of learning about emotional intelligence. I wish I had done that better with. My mother died of dementia in March. And you keep learning, don't you? And you keep seeing your gaps in emotional intelligence. And I reflected the last 9 months about her life journey, the last 2 years, and feeling I would, with hindsight, with more emotional intelligence now, have felt it, experienced it. I don't like the word dealt, but dealt with it differently. And I think that's all we can ever do in life, isn't it? We do the best we can in the moment. But I think emotional intelligence is about the ability to reflect in an unfearful way that we don't always get it right. And to share that with others to help them release their moments when they didn't feel others didn't get it right with them or they didn't get it right with others, as a way to, well, this is how I now would try and be with someone.
Yeah, and even people who are very highly emotionally intelligent can have a bad day, can't they? I mean, we can all say things in the moment when we're upset or when we're angry or when we're tired. You know, I guess what you said is it's about reflecting on that, isn't it? And learning from that experience.
And even, you know, I maintain to this day, you know, even with my partner, you know, when you've been some 32 years, am I emotionally intelligent always with him in my responses? Of course not. Because relationships, personal or work-wise, are loaded with so many layers and loaded in the moment with so many things to consider. But I think the important bit is knowing when you haven't been emotionally intelligent and to be able to go back and say, I messed up there. I actually wasn't in your shoes. I was firmly in mine and digging it in mine rather than actually thinking where you might be coming from. I stopped seeing you as the person at that moment and I just saw an expression or behavior towards me instead of thinking what was behind it, where was the feeling behind that. You know, that's complicated and simple, but it's easier to go to a simple response rather than to actually think if we have to think as human beings that there's always a feeling behind every interaction, which there is, that's quite exhausting. And we're not going to always manage it hour by hour, but I think what we can manage is the self-reflection of when actually that wasn't a great response from me coming back to someone. I
mean, wouldn't it be a wonderful world if we were all like that? We were all able to reflect and have that communication, that connected communication.